When I woke up on my 70th birthday, the house was unusually quiet. I had spent the previous evening preparing a modest celebration, hoping to gather my family and a few close friends to mark the milestone. Yet, as the morning sun streamed through the curtains, the silence in my home felt heavier than the gentle light. I dressed carefully, choosing the soft blue dress I had bought months ago, imagining the smiles and laughter that might fill the room later. But the hours passed, and the phone remained silent. Only a handful of acquaintances stopped by, offering polite congratulations and brief hugs, none of them the warmth I had longed for. By midday, I found myself alone in the living room, the faint scent of lilies I had arranged still lingering in a vase on the coffee table. My thoughts wandered to my son Daniel. In years past, he had always made an effort to be present on my birthdays, even when life's demands tugged him away. Today, however, there was no call, no message, no sign that he remembered. I tried to shake off the creeping disappointment, reminding myself that relationships ebb and flow, that people grow busy, and that love sometimes expresses itself in ways beyond the obvious. Just as I was about to set the table for a simple dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a small envelope in Daniel's handwriting resting in the mail slot. There was no accompanying gift, no card with a cheerful note, only this single envelope, its paper thick and unadorned, yet heavy in my hand. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. Maybe this was his way of acknowledging the day. A gesture of love wrapped in simplicity. I carefully closed the door and settled into my favorite armchair. The envelope balanced on my lap. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal, unfolding the letter inside. The neatly typed words stared back at me, beginning with a sentence so cold and stark it made my breath catch. "You are no longer." The ink seemed to blur before my eyes as I read the phrase again, trying to grasp its full meaning. My heart pounded in confusion and disbelief. Was this some cruel mistake? Had I misread the line? I read on, each sentence cutting deeper. A declaration that I was no longer part of Daniel's life, that he wanted no contact, no visits, no calls. The words were final, unyielding, leaving no room for negotiation or discussion. I sat frozen, the letter trembling in my hands as a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. Shock was the first to arrive, knocking the air from my lungs and stealing the warmth from my chest. How could my own son, the boy I had cradled in my arms, the man I had supported through every trial, send me such a message on a day meant to celebrate life and love? Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the harsh black print into smudged lines. A deep ache settled in my soul, an emptiness that echoed through the quiet room. My mind scrambled to understand. I replayed recent conversations with Daniel, searching for signs I might have missed. Had I been too demanding, too critical? Was there some unspoken grievance I had failed to address? The sting of rejection was sharp, but what hurt more was the silence that had grown between us over the past months. Invitations left unanswered, calls that went unreturned, the subtle withdrawal that I had tried to ignore until now. The letter was a confirmation of what I had feared but dared not fully admit. I thought about the years we had shared, the birthdays, the holidays, the laughter and tears, each memory now tinged with a bittersweet shadow. I remembered a recent family dinner where Daniel had seemed distant, distracted by his phone, barely engaging in conversation. I had chalked it up to stress or fatigue, but perhaps it was the beginning of this divide. The letter forced me to confront the reality that our relationship was fractured, perhaps beyond immediate repair. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, I held the letter close, feeling its weight not just as paper, but as a symbol of loss. The day that should have been filled with joy was instead marked by a profound loneliness. Yet beneath the hurt was a flicker of determination, a quiet resolve not to let this be the final chapter of our story. I knew that understanding what had driven Daniel to write such words would be essential, even if the path ahead was uncertain and painful. The quiet of the house wrapped around me like a heavy cloak as evening approached. I set the table for one, the meal untouched as I sat with the letter in my hands, reading and rereading its contents. I wondered if Daniel had truly meant every word or if there was pain behind his anger, confusion beneath his distance. The sharp edges of the letter's message softened in my heart as I considered the possibility that this was a cry for help rather than a farewell. In the stillness of that day, I realized that my 70th birthday had become something I had never anticipated. A day not just of celebration, but of reckoning. The quiet was not just absence of noise, but a space where difficult truths could be faced. As night fell, I remained seated by the window watching the stars emerge, each one a tiny point of light in the vast darkness. I clung to the hope that, like those stars, our relationship might still shine through the shadows, waiting for its chance to be rekindled. The words in the letter echoed relentlessly in my mind. "You are no longer part of my life." I read the phrase over and over, each time feeling my chest tighten as disbelief gave way to a crushing wave of confusion. How could Daniel, my son, choose to sever our bond with such finality? The letter was clear, unambiguous, and mercilessly cold. There was no room for misunderstanding, no hint of regret or hope for reconciliation, only a stark declaration that I had been erased from his world. I sat there, clutching the letter as though it might dissolve into the air if I let go. My mind struggled to process the harsh reality. Had I done something so terrible that he no longer wanted me in his life? I tried to remember every recent interaction, every conversation, seeking the moment when things had gone so wrong. But all I could find were fragments of distant exchanges, strained smiles, and silences that had grown heavier with each passing day. The shock was overwhelming, but beneath it simmered a growing tide of questions and doubts. Was this letter truly from Daniel's heart? Or had it been written in anger or frustration? Did he feel this way because of something I had said or done? Or was there something else troubling him that I was unaware of? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making the ache in my chest deepen. I was left grasping for answers in a sea of silence. I remembered the last time I had seen him, just a few weeks ago, at a family gathering that had felt more like a formality than a celebration. Daniel had been distant, distracted, and I had sensed a barrier growing between us. I had tried to reach out, to bridge the gap with gentle words and a warm smile, but he had seemed to shrink away. Now that distance had become a chasm, and the letter was the final barrier. As the hours passed, I found myself replaying every detail of our recent interactions, searching for clues I might have missed. Had I been too critical when he confided in me about his work? Had I misunderstood his need for space and instead pushed too hard? The thought that I might have contributed to this rift filled me with guilt and sorrow. I wished I could turn back time, soften my words, and show him more patience. The emotional impact of this rejection was profound. On a day meant to celebrate life and love, I felt utterly alone, cast aside by the person who should have been closest to me. The sting of abandonment was sharp, cutting through the years of shared memories and unconditional love. I was left to wonder if our relationship had been fragile all along, held together by hope rather than understanding. I thought about the milestones I had looked forward to sharing with Daniel. Birthdays, holidays, quiet afternoons over tea. Each one now seemed uncertain, shadowed by the letter's harsh message. The future I had imagined with my son, the stories we would tell, the laughter we would share, felt suddenly out of reach. A deep sadness settled in my heart, mingling with a stubborn flicker of hope that this pain might not be permanent. Despite the turmoil, I found myself wanting to understand Daniel's feelings more deeply. What had driven him to write such a letter? Was there pain or frustration beneath his words that I had failed to see? I realized that before I could heal, I needed to confront this reality and seek the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling as I considered calling him, but doubt held me back. Would he answer? Would he be willing to talk? Or would I only hear silence? The fear of rejection was almost as strong as the pain itself. Still, I knew that waiting in the shadows of uncertainty would only deepen the divide. Instead, I sat quietly, letting the tears fall freely as I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the moment. The isolation was suffocating, yet within it, a fragile resolve began to take root. I was determined not to let this letter define the end of our story. If Daniel had closed the door, I would find a way to open it again, even if it took time and patience. As night deepened outside my window, I found myself reflecting on the nature of love and family. Relationships, I realized, are rarely simple or perfect. They are woven from moments of joy and sorrow, understanding and misunderstanding, connection and distance. This letter was a painful chapter, but it did not have to be the whole book. I clung to the hope that beneath Daniel's words was a heart still capable of love and forgiveness. That somewhere, beyond the hurt and anger, he might still want to heal what had been broken. The journey ahead would be uncertain, but I was ready to take the first step. For now, I would hold on to the memories of better days and the belief that one day we might find our way back to each other. In the quiet that followed the letter's devastating message, I found myself adrift in a sea of memories, searching for signs I might have missed, subtle hints of the growing distance between Daniel and me that had, somehow slipped past my notice. I began to revisit past conversations and family gatherings, piecing together moments that, at the time, seemed insignificant but now felt like fragments of a larger, painful puzzle. I recalled the last birthday party I had thrown for Daniel, just a few months before. He had arrived late, distracted and withdrawn, his smiles forced and his laughter hollow. I remembered how he had seemed eager to leave early, making excuses about work and commitments. At the time, I told myself he was simply busy, that life's pressures weighed heavily on him. But now, with the letter's cold words still echoing in my mind, I wondered if that night was the beginning of something deeper. A subtle shift in our relationship that I had failed to recognize. Other family gatherings surfaced in my thoughts, each tinged with an undercurrent of distance. During holidays, when the house should have been filled with warmth and joy, Daniel's participation had grown more perfunctory. He sat quietly, often retreating to his phone or finding reasons to step outside. I had attributed this change to the natural ebb and flow of adult relationships, convincing myself that as children grow older, their needs for independence increase. But perhaps in my denial, I had overlooked the signs of a widening gulf. I also remembered conversations that now seemed weighted with unspoken tension. There was the time Daniel had confided in me about a difficult decision at work, and I had responded with advice that, in hindsight, may have sounded more like criticism than support. His face had fallen, and the warmth between us had chilled for a moment. I had brushed it off as a fleeting misunderstanding, but it lingered in the silence that followed. The more I reflected, the more I recognized how miscommunication and unmet expectations might have sown seeds of resentment. Perhaps I had expected too much, or failed to listen deeply enough to his struggles. I thought about the times I had tried to reach out, only to be met with brief replies or vague promises to catch up soon. Each missed opportunity to bridge the gap now felt like a thread unraveling from the fabric of our relationship. I asked myself if there had been conflicts or misunderstandings I had ignored or dismissed. I tried to recall whether Daniel had ever expressed frustration or disappointment with me, but those moments, if they existed, had been carefully hidden behind polite smiles or silence. I realized that sometimes the most painful distance grows not from loud arguments, but from quiet withdrawals and unspoken hurt. As I sifted through these memories, I felt a deep ache for the times lost and the chances missed. I wished I had been more perceptive, more patient, more open to seeing the cracks before they widened. I recognize now that relationships require constant care, attentiveness, and a willingness to confront discomfort. I wondered if I had failed Daniel in these ways, inadvertently pushing him away. Yet beneath the sorrow was a fierce desire to understand my son's true feelings, to hear his side of the story without judgment or defensiveness. I longed to know what he had experienced, what struggles he had faced that I might not have been aware of. The letter's harsh words had created a barrier, but I believed that beyond that wall was still the boy I had raised, the son I loved deeply. I thought about the times Daniel had confided in me as a child and young man, sharing his hopes and fears. Those moments were precious windows into his heart, and I hoped that by reconnecting, even now, I might rediscover that openness. I resolved to listen more carefully, to ask gently, and to approach him with an open heart, ready to receive whatever truth he was willing to share. In the midst of these reflections, I also confronted my own role in the estrangement. I acknowledged that I had not always been perfect. There were times I had been impatient, times when my own worries and fears had clouded my judgment. I realized that healing would require humility and forgiveness, both for Daniel and for myself. Holding on to blame or resentment would only deepen the rift. The memories were bittersweet, reminders of a bond once strong in moments that had brought joy, intertwined with the pain of growing apart. I understood now that relationships are fragile, easily fractured by silence and misunderstanding, but also capable of repair through empathy and effort. As the days passed, I found myself returning to these memories, each time with a greater sense of clarity and compassion. I held on to the hope that by understanding the past, I could help pave a path toward reconciliation. The journey would not be easy, but it was one I was willing to undertake. Despite the sadness, I also felt a quiet strength emerging, a resolve to reach out, to bridge the gap, and to rebuild what had been lost. The memories were not just reminders of distance but also of connection, of love that had endured despite the challenges. They became a foundation upon which I could begin to rebuild trust and closeness. In those moments of reflection, I recognized that the pain I felt was not just about my own loss, but also about the loss Daniel must be experiencing. I imagined his struggles, his fears, and his hopes, and I wished for a way to ease his burden. I wanted to be a source of support, not a source of pain. With this understanding, I felt a renewed determination to heal, to listen, and to forgive. I knew that the road ahead would require patience and courage, but I was ready to take the first steps. The memories of the past, both joyful and painful, would guide me as I sought to mend the broken threads of our relationship. And so, with a heart full of hope and a mind open to the possibilities, I prepared myself to reach out to Daniel. Not with blame or anger, but with love and a desire to understand. The path to healing had begun, and I was ready to walk it one step at a time. After days of silent reflection and revisiting memories, I reached a decision that had been both terrifying and necessary. I would contact Daniel. Despite the letter's harsh tone and the growing distance between us, I knew that if I wanted to heal this rift, I had to take the first step. The pain of rejection was raw, but the thought of never hearing his voice again was far worse. I picked up my phone, fingers trembling as I dialed his number. The line rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice soft but steady, expressing my love and my hope to talk whenever he was ready. I told him I missed him and that I was willing to listen, to understand, and to forgive. Then I waited, the silence stretching out like an endless chasm between us. Days passed with no response. I tried again, each call ending the same way, ringing into an empty void. Text messages followed, brief and tentative, asking if he was okay, if we could meet or talk. Still no reply. The silence was deafening, and with each unanswered attempt, the loneliness deepened. It felt as though I were shouting across a vast canyon, my words echoing back to me unheard. I struggled with the pain of being ignored, the fear that Daniel no longer wanted me in his life at all. Yet beneath that fear was a persistent hope that this was temporary, a reflection of whatever struggles he might be facing rather than a final goodbye. I reminded myself that healing takes time, that sometimes people need space before they are ready to open their hearts again. During those long days, I found myself oscillating between hope and despair. I questioned whether I had done enough, whether my words had conveyed the love and remorse I felt. I wondered if I had pushed too hard or not enough. The uncertainty gnawed at me, and I found solace in journaling, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto paper in an attempt to make sense of the chaos inside. I also sought comfort in the memories of better times, the laughter and warmth we had once shared. Those memories became a lifeline, reminding me that the bond between a mother and son, though tested, could still endure. I clung to the belief that beneath Daniel's silence was still the son I loved, waiting for the right moment to reach out. As the days stretched into weeks, I considered other ways to break through the wall of silence. I thought about writing a letter, longer and more heartfelt than the brief messages I had sent. I imagined inviting him to a neutral place, a quiet cafe or park where we could meet without pressure. But fear held me back, fear of rejection, fear of reopening wounds too raw to bear. Still, I knew that my silence would only deepen the divide. Forgiveness and reconciliation require courage, and I resolved to muster whatever strength I had left to find a way forward. I reminded myself that love is not about immediate resolution, but about persistence, patience, and faith in the possibility of healing. In the quiet moments, I also reflected on the importance of forgiveness, not just forgiving Daniel but forgiving myself. I realized that holding on to guilt or blame would only keep me trapped in pain. Letting go of judgment, embracing empathy, and opening my heart to understanding were essential steps toward rebuilding our relationship. The loneliness was profound, but it also became a catalyst for growth. I began to see that this journey was not only about reconnecting with Daniel, but also about learning to find strength within myself. I rediscovered old passions, reached out to friends, and allowed myself moments of quiet joy, all while keeping the door open for Daniel's return. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, I whispered a silent prayer for my son. I wished for his peace, his healing, and the courage to face whatever demons he was battling. I hoped that someday soon, he would find his way back to me, and that when he did, I would be ready to listen without anger, without hurt, simply with love. Though the pain of rejection still lingered, I held on to the glimmer of hope that our story was not over. I was determined to keep reaching out, to keep believing in the power of forgiveness and the resilience of family bonds. No matter how long it took, I would wait for Daniel, ready to embrace him when he was ready to come home. Just as the silence between Daniel and me seemed endless, I received an unexpected message from Emily, my daughter-in-law. At first, I hesitated to open it, unsure whether I was ready for whatever news she might bring. But curiosity mingled with a fragile hope won out. The message was brief but heartfelt, and it changed everything. Emily wrote that she had wanted to reach out for some time, but had been uncertain how to bridge the gap. She explained that Daniel was going through a difficult period, struggling with personal issues that had affected his behavior and his ability to connect with those around him. She didn't go into detail, but her words conveyed both concern and a wish for reconciliation. Reading Emily's message, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because there was a reason behind Daniel's distance, a struggle not rooted in rejection but in pain. Sadness because I hadn't seen the battles he was fighting silently. It was a reminder of how easily we can miss the unseen wounds in those we love. Emily expressed hope that, with time and support, Daniel might be ready to rebuild the relationships that had frayed. She offered her support, not as a barrier but as a bridge, willing to help facilitate communication when the time was right. Her kindness and openness felt like a lifeline, a small beacon of light in the darkness that had enveloped our family. I found myself reflecting on the complexity of Daniel's situation. His struggles were not just about me or our relationship but part of a larger, more challenging story. It made me realize that healing required patience, understanding, and a willingness to look beyond my own hurt to see the whole picture. Emily's message also stirred a deep gratitude. Despite everything, she had chosen compassion over distance, reaching out in a way that honored both Daniel's pain and my love for him. It reminded me that family bonds, though fragile, can be strengthened by empathy and support from unexpected places. With this new perspective, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The path to reconciliation might be longer and more complicated than I had imagined, but it was not closed. Knowing that Daniel was not alone in his struggles, and that Emily was willing to stand with him, gave me courage to keep reaching out, to keep believing in the possibility of healing. I responded to Emily with gratitude, thanking her for her honesty and kindness. I told her I was ready to be patient, and to offer my love and support in whatever way Daniel needed. Her reply was warm and reassuring, a small but meaningful connection that softened the edges of my loneliness. In the days that followed, I found myself holding on to this new thread of hope. I thought about how families are often complex tapestries of emotions, challenges, and love. Sometimes the threads fray, but with care and effort, they can be rewoven into something strong and beautiful. Emily's message reminded me that I was not alone in wanting to heal, and that there were others who cared deeply about Daniel's well-being and our family's future. It was a comfort to know that, even in the silence, there were allies willing to help mend what had been broken. This unexpected ally gave me strength to continue moving forward, to prepare myself for the conversations that might come, and to open my heart to the possibility of forgiveness and reunion. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, I felt less isolated, buoyed by the knowledge that love and understanding could still find their way. With Emily's support, I began to see that the journey toward healing was not just mine alone. It was a shared path, walked with those who cared for Daniel and for me. This realization brought a quiet peace, a gentle reassurance that, even in the darkest moments, we are never truly alone. After weeks of silence and uncertainty, the moment I had longed for finally arrived. A phone call from Daniel. My heart pounded as the phone rang, each vibration sending a wave of anticipation and nervousness through me. When I heard his voice on the other end, tentative, strained but unmistakably his, it was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, yet a new journey was just beginning. We started cautiously, words feeling fragile as if we were walking on thin ice. Daniel's voice carried a mixture of frustration and sorrow, and I listened without interruption as he explained the feelings that had driven the distance between us. He spoke of his struggles, pressures at work, personal doubts, and a sense of isolation that had built up over time. He didn't place blame on me or anyone else. Instead, he shared his frustration with himself and the situation he found himself in. Hearing him lay bare his emotions without anger was both heartbreaking and healing. When it was my turn to speak, I let my hurt show, admitting how deeply the letter and the silence had wounded me. But I also shared my love for him and my willingness to forgive, to understand, and to rebuild what had been broken. I told him that no matter how far apart we had drifted, my heart had never closed to him. I wanted him to know that he was not alone. As we talked, the tension that had built up over months began to ease. The conversation became a bridge connecting two hearts that had grown distant, but still beat with love for one another. Daniel expressed relief at finally being able to speak openly, and I felt a profound gratitude for his courage to reach out despite the pain. We acknowledged that healing would take time, and that there would be moments of discomfort and uncertainty ahead. But the willingness to listen and the desire to reconnect were powerful foundations. We made tentative plans to meet in person, choosing a quiet cafe where we could talk without distractions. The idea of seeing him face to face both excited and scared me, but I knew it was a necessary step. After the call ended, I sat quietly, absorbing the flood of emotions, relief, hope, sadness, and love intertwined. I realized that this conversation, as difficult as it had been, was a turning point. It was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship, one built on honesty and the shared commitment to heal. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying the conversation in my mind, cherishing the moments when Daniel's voice softened, when he laughed nervously, and when we found common ground despite the hurt. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt connected to my son again. I prepared for our upcoming meeting with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. I thought about what I wanted to say, but more importantly, I reminded myself to listen, to be patient and open-hearted. I wanted Daniel to feel safe sharing his feelings without fear of judgment or disappointment. The healing conversation had given me a renewed sense of purpose and strength. I understood that relationships are fragile and complex, but also resilient when nurtured with love and understanding. The path ahead would not be easy, but we had taken the crucial first step together. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The distance that had once seemed insurmountable had begun to shrink, replaced by the fragile threads of connection we were weaving anew. I held on to the hope that, with time and effort, our bond would grow stronger, and the wounds of the past would begin to heal. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness is not just a gift we give others but also a gift we give ourselves. A way to free our hearts and open the door to love's enduring power. And as I drifted to sleep, I felt grateful for the courage that had brought us back to each other, and for the promise of healing that lay ahead. After that heartfelt conversation, Daniel and I began to rebuild the fragile bridge between us with small, steady steps. Our communication, once strained and sporadic, became more consistent and meaningful. Each message, each call, each meeting was a thread weaving us closer together, slowly restoring the bond that had frayed over time. We started with simple exchanges, texts to check in on each other's day, sharing a funny story or a photo that reminded us of a shared memory. These small moments felt precious, like planting seeds in a garden that had long been neglected. I treasured each one, recognizing that healing is often found in the ordinary rhythms of everyday life. Our conversations deepened gradually. Daniel began to open up about his work pressures, his doubts, and the weight he had been carrying silently. I listened without judgment, offering support and encouragement. I shared parts of my own struggles, creating a space where vulnerability was met with empathy rather than fear. This mutual openness was new and fragile but filled with promise. Family gatherings, once tense and awkward, started to feel warmer. Daniel made an effort to attend more events, and though his presence was sometimes quiet, it was meaningful. I noticed him engaging more with relatives, laughing with nieces and nephews, and even joining in on old family traditions. These moments of connection brought light to my heart, reminding me that relationships can be mended with patience and care. I also focused on patience and understanding, knowing that trust cannot be rushed. There were days when Daniel was distant or unresponsive, and though it hurt, I reminded myself that healing isn't linear. I learned to accept the ebb and flow, to give space without withdrawing my love. This balance was delicate but essential, Through this process, I reflected on the importance of forgiveness, not just forgiving past hurts but forgiving imperfections in the present. Both Daniel and I were navigating unfamiliar territory, learning to communicate and connect in new ways. Mistakes were made, apologies given, and slowly, a foundation of trust was laid. Our renewed relationship began to influence the wider family dynamic. Other relatives noticed the change and responded with warmth and encouragement. It felt as though a collective healing was taking place, with each repaired bond strengthening the whole. The family gatherings started to regain their vibrancy, filled with laughter and genuine connection. I found myself cherishing the small victories, the unexpected phone call, the invitation to dinner, the shared silence that felt comfortable rather than strained. These moments were reminders that love endures, even through hardship, and that relationships are living, evolving things that require nurture. As trust grew, Daniel and I began to make plans for future celebrations and shared experiences. We talked about visiting places we loved, attending family events together, and rebuilding traditions that had been interrupted. The prospect of these moments brought a renewed sense of joy and anticipation. Through patience, understanding, and consistent effort, the distance that had once felt insurmountable began to fade. I realized that healing relationships is a journey, one that requires courage, humility, and above all love. The progress we made was a testament to the resilience of our bond and the power of forgiveness. In quiet moments, I reflected on how far we had come, from the pain of rejection to the hope of renewal. The journey was not without its challenges, but each step brought us closer to a place of peace and connection. I felt grateful for the chance to rebuild, to grow, and to embrace the evolving nature of our relationship. As I looked ahead, I understood that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where love, patience, and understanding would guide us forward. The trust we were rebuilding was fragile, but strong enough to carry us through whatever lay ahead. And with each passing day, I felt more certain that the bond between a mother and her son could weather even the deepest storms. As the weeks turned into months, I came to understand that relationships are not static. They evolve, sometimes in unexpected ways, requiring patience, flexibility, and effort from both sides. Daniel and I were no exception. The once familiar bond between mother and son had shifted, shaped by the challenges we had faced, but also by the mutual desire to move forward with grace and openness. I learned to embrace the changes rather than resist them. Our conversations took on new rhythms, sometimes deep and heartfelt, other times light and playful. I appreciated that Daniel was finding his own way to relate to me, and I made space for that, recognizing that the past could not be perfectly restored, but a new authentic connection could be built in its place. Daniel began to make genuine efforts to include me more in his life. He called more often, invited me to events, and shared moments from his daily routine. I noticed the subtle ways he showed care, checking in when I was unwell, asking for advice, or simply sending a quick message to say he was thinking of me. These gestures, small as they were, spoke volumes about the healing that had taken root. Mutual respect blossomed alongside our renewed closeness. We spoke more openly about boundaries and expectations, learning to navigate our differences with kindness rather than frustration. I was careful to honor Daniel's need for independence, while expressing my own desire for connection. This balance was new territory for both of us, but became a foundation for deeper understanding. With this openness came a strengthening of love that felt both familiar and fresh. I saw Daniel not just as my son but as a complex, evolving person with his own struggles and triumphs. I grew more patient with his imperfections and more grateful for his presence in my life. In turn, I believe he saw me not only as a mother but as a friend and ally. I also found peace in accepting that some things would never be the same. The hurt and distance we had endured left their mark, and while forgiveness had healed many wounds, the scars reminded us of the journey we had traveled. Rather than dwelling on what was lost, I chose to focus on what we were building. Something resilient, honest, and grounded in love. This acceptance extended to the wider family dynamic as well. I observed how our renewed relationship influenced others, creating ripples of understanding and connection. Daniel's efforts to engage with family deepened, and I felt joy in witnessing those bonds strengthen alongside ours. The process taught me valuable lessons about the nature of change and the importance of adaptability. I came to see that holding rigid expectations can hinder growth, while embracing change with an open heart allows relationships to flourish in new and meaningful ways. In quiet moments, I reflected on how far we had come, from the pain of estrangement to the hope of renewal. The journey had transformed me, teaching me resilience, humility, and the power of unconditional love. I felt a deep gratitude for the chance to rebuild not just my relationship with Daniel, but also my own capacity for patience and empathy. As I looked to the future, I was filled with a sense of calm and optimism. I knew that our relationship would continue to evolve, presenting new challenges and joys alike. But I felt ready to face whatever came with an open heart and a steadfast commitment to love and understanding. In embracing change, I found not loss but growth, a testament to the enduring strength of family and the human spirit. And in this new chapter, Daniel and I walked forward together, hand in hand, ready to create a shared story defined not by past pain, but by present hope and future possibility. The day of the family gathering arrived, marking a milestone not just in the calendar, but in the healing of our fractured bonds. As I prepared for the event, a swirl of emotions filled me: nervousness, hope, and a deep sense of gratitude. This was the first time in months that Daniel and I would celebrate together, surrounded by loved ones, with the weight of past hurts beginning to lift. When Daniel arrived, I felt a rush of warmth and relief. His smile was genuine, and the way he greeted me, tentative yet affectionate, spoke volumes about the progress we had made. The atmosphere in the room felt lighter, filled with the kind of joy and laughter that comes from shared history and renewed connection. Throughout the gathering, moments of genuine happiness unfolded. Daniel engaged in conversations with family members, his laughter blending with theirs in a way that felt both familiar and new. I watched as he interacted with nieces and nephews, passing down stories and jokes that bridged generations. These simple acts of connection filled my heart with a quiet joy I had feared lost. There were times when I caught Daniel's eye across the room, and we shared a smile or a nod that said, without words, "We're here together." Those small gestures became anchors, reminders that despite the past, we were rebuilding a relationship rooted in love and respect. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by family members who expressed their happiness at seeing Daniel and me reconnect. Their support and encouragement added to the sense of healing, creating a circle of care that embraced us both. It was clear that the wounds we had suffered were not ours alone but had touched many, and that our journey toward reconciliation was a collective one. At one point during the celebration, Daniel pulled me aside to speak privately. His voice was steady as he acknowledged the pain of the past and expressed his gratitude for my patience and love. He told me how much it meant to him to be welcomed back into the family fold, and how committed he was to nurturing our renewed bond. I responded with tears in my eyes, sharing my own feelings of forgiveness and hope. We agreed that while the journey was ongoing, this moment was a testament to the resilience of family and the power of forgiveness. The conversation left me feeling both humbled and uplifted. The night was filled with laughter, music, and stories shared around the table. The sadness that had once clouded family gatherings was replaced by an atmosphere of warmth and acceptance. It was a celebration not only of birthdays and milestones but of healing and new beginnings. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel and I stood together, watching the younger generations play and the older ones reminiscing. I felt a profound sense of belonging, a reassurance that despite the challenges we had faced, family remained a source of strength and love. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From silence and rejection to connection and hope, the progress was fragile but real, and it filled me with optimism for the future. I understood that relationships require ongoing care, but I was ready to embrace that responsibility with an open heart. The celebration was more than an event. It was a symbol of renewal. It marked a turning point where past hurts gave way to the possibility of joy, where love triumphed over pain. In Daniel's presence, I felt valued, seen, and deeply loved. Looking ahead, I carried with me a hopeful vision of future gatherings, filled with laughter, understanding, and shared memories. I knew there would be challenges, but I also knew that the foundation we had rebuilt could support whatever came next. That night, I fell asleep with a heart full of gratitude, comforted by the knowledge that the bonds of family, though tested, are enduring. The journey was far from over, but we had taken a significant step toward healing together. and for that I was profoundly thankful. Reflecting on this journey from rejection to reconciliation has been both humbling and enlightening. The path we traveled was marked by pain, confusion, and silence, but also by resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of family bonds. I've come to understand that relationships are rarely simple or linear. They ebb and flow, sometimes fracturing in unexpected ways, yet always holding the possibility of healing if nurtured with compassion and patience. One of the most profound lessons I've learned is the power of communication. It's not just about exchanging words but about truly listening, opening one's heart to understand the feelings behind the silence, the fears behind the anger, and the hope behind the hurt. When Daniel and I began to listen without judgment, our conversations transformed from barriers into bridges, allowing us to reconnect in a way that honored both our vulnerabilities and our love. Forgiveness emerged as another vital thread weaving through our story. It wasn't always easy to forgive, especially when wounds felt fresh and the pain sharp. But I realized that forgiveness is not about erasing the past or pretending hurt never happened. It's about freeing ourselves from the weight of bitterness, allowing love to grow anew. In forgiving Daniel, I also forgave myself for the mistakes, the misunderstandings, and the times I fell short as a mother. This journey also taught me the importance of resilience, the quiet strength to keep reaching out, even when met with silence, the courage to remain open, even when hurt feels overwhelming. Family bonds are tested by time and circumstance, but they can endure and even deepen when nourished by love and understanding. I've come to cherish the value of patience and acceptance. Healing does not happen overnight, nor does it follow a predictable path. There were moments when hope faltered and doubts crept in, but holding steadfast to the belief that love can overcome hardship sustained me. Acceptance of change, of evolving relationships and new dynamics, became a source of peace rather than resistance. Throughout this experience, I've seen how empathy can transform pain into connection. By trying to see the world through Daniel's eyes, I gained insight into his struggles and fears, which helped me respond with compassion rather than frustration. This empathy became a bridge that brought us closer and allowed us to rebuild trust. I encourage anyone facing similar hardships in their family to hold on to hope and to seek understanding. Relationships are complex and sometimes painful, but they are also capable of remarkable healing. The journey requires courage, humility, and a willingness to embrace both the joy and the sorrow that come with love. Cherishing relationships, even when they are difficult, is a gift we give ourselves and those we love. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles and that connection, no matter how fractured, can be restored with effort and grace. As I look ahead, I carry these lessons with me, grateful for the renewed bond with Daniel and the family we continue to build together. The scars of the past remain, but they no longer define us. Instead, they remind us of our strength and the enduring power of love. Now, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Have you faced moments of rejection or estrangement within your family? How did you navigate those challenges? What lessons did you learn about forgiveness, communication, and resilience? I hope that sharing my story encourages you to hold on to hope and to believe in the possibility of healing. Family is a journey, a tapestry woven with threads of joy, pain, growth, and love. Though the road may be difficult, it is always worth traveling. Thank you for listening to my story. I look forward to hearing yours. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.